Back in April of 2024, I got my first scan spec of Phoenix 200 by Harman Photo. I was really happy with the results, but that was in no small part due to the conditions in which I'd shot it. Phoenix 200 was marketed as a very summery film. It was the summer of Phoenix, and I think that was truth in advertising. I had chosen to take the film to a trip to Madrid, loaded into a small Canon point-and-shoot camera. That was my only film camera on the trip, and that was my only roll of film. Maybe because I was carefully rationing them out throughout the trip, that's why I ended up with such a nice variety of images. But the fact is, we had the perfect conditions, bright, sunny weather, all the time. The particularities of the Phoenix film are obvious. Warm, punchy, really high contrast, really saturated. It's not natural, it's not realistic. It's a film cocktail mixed dangerously strong, and if pushed too far, it risks producing some nauseating results. But at its best, it's stunning. Dripping with color, radiating with captured light is what I love about film photography. I don't generally go for just accurate, normal color palettes because you can get that much better on a digital camera. I like the alchemy of it and the little reminders that when you took this picture, you inflicted a sunburn on a little strip of plastic. In less indulgent language, it's like Kodak Gold times 10. This year, Harman brought out a sequel to their original Phoenix formula, Phoenix 2. And my expectations were sky high. Reviews were touting it as an improvement in every way. I was sure that I was going to pick up a new favorite film. Just based on the new blue packaging, you might expect Phoenix 2 to be more of a cool film, whereas Phoenix 1 was a warm film. That is definitely not the case. The difference between Phoenix 1 and 2 is more like summer and autumn rather than red and blue. The colors are a bit more restrained, but they're still decidedly on the warm side of the spectrum. I would describe this as an earth tone film, and generally I like earth tones. Generally. I shot my first roll of Phoenix 2 on a trip back home to Norway. We had some incredible sights, obviously, and although the weather was Norwegian weather, it was still quite good. We had some sunny days, and I expected these scans to blow me away. Sad to say, this entire roll was a complete wash for me. Utter disappointment. The light meter of this camera is very reliable. I've had it for a number of years and I've never had to make any special considerations when exposing my pictures. So I was really surprised to see that this roll of Phoenix 2 was completely underexposed. All of it. Like Phoenix 1, this is a light-hungry emulsion. They both do well in strong, direct sunlight or with a flash or something like that. You want the light source to be directly hitting your subject, not shooting them in the shade or in an overcast scene. In those more ambiguous kind of conditions, your internal light meter is going to be utterly useless. And that's probably the most useful thing I have to tell you in this video. I wasn't completely convinced that the underexposure was just the film's fault. I guess I was in denial. I still had high hopes for this film. And I still can't really account for it. But one thing that I can guarantee is that none of the 3 rolls of Phoenix 2 that I shot for this review were damaged by any airport scanners. In case you don't know, putting your film through an X-ray or especially modern-day CT scanners at airports or anywhere else can really damage the result. It's by no means a 100% guarantee, and I've definitely had films forced through CT scanners by airport staff that don't understand and had some acceptable results still, whereas other times they have come out really muddy and underexposed. However, I was able to successfully get my film hand searched by security, going to Norway and going back. And I was able to do the same thing again for my second roll as I traveled to and from the Netherlands. So this second roll was shot in Amsterdam and Utrecht in brilliant sunshine throughout. It did come out marginally better, I will say that, but this time I was taking really heavy special considerations when exposing my shots. One strategy I developed was to expose for the feet or the ground instead of what the light meter tells you when you frame your shot. So if you're shooting outdoors and you have the sky visible inside the viewfinder, the presence of the sky in the shot can really distract your light meter and think the scene is much brighter than it is. On a really contrasty film like Phoenix 1 and 2, this problem is exacerbated significantly. So when we were shooting outside and the sky was bright behind the subject, I would point the camera first down to their knees or their shoes or the cobbles on the ground, and I would see what the light meter has to say about that. The sky might be a bit blown out, but that's really not a problem on film. Overexposing things always tends to look better than underexposing them. So I used this technique pretty consistently. And yeah, this is still a bit muddy, isn't it?
Let me be clear.
On a bright sunny day, most conventional color film is not this sensitive. When I first got a manual film camera, it had no working light meter at all. I shot exclusively using the Sunny 16 rule, and this is how those pictures came out. And that was on Kodak Gold, another 200 ISO film. So what's the excuse? Why is Phoenix 2 so much harder to expose correctly? I think it's definitely a weakness on the film. I think what it comes down to is that I don't particularly like the midtones on this film. there's a sort of brackish, swampy green tint across it. Getting this sort of green tint is common when your color film is underexposed. You might see that your dark backgrounds often are a little bit green tinted, but even when you expose Phoenix 2 correctly, there's still this greenish haze over it that's obvious when you compare it side by side with Phoenix 1. And that brings us to the next segment. So when I returned to Manchester, I was about ready to write up this review. I was not happy with the first 2 rolls of film, but I still wasn't completely confident that it wasn't just me being a bad photographer. So I decided I'll do 1 more roll of Phoenix 2, and this time I'm leaving nothing to chance. I borrowed a second SLR camera from my friend Nick. It looks almost just like this one. It's basically a knockoff Pentax. This is a Casina. The other one was a Petri. That basically just allows me to use the same lenses, swap them from one camera to the other. Why did I need 2 cameras? Well, I picked up 1 roll of Phoenix 1, 1 roll of Phoenix 2, loaded them into the camera simultaneously, and set out to make side-by-side comparison shots in sort of different conditions. Every single one of these shots was for research, not for the memories, not for capturing the moment, for science. So without further ado, let's look at some of these comparisons. So originally I did also mean to have this segment be scripted. I mean, did you hear those bars I dropped about summer and autumn before? That was... Shut up! Shut the fuck up! It's like I'm living in the fucking GTA lobby. Anyway, I decided to just do this off the cuff. No. We'll do it live! Fuck it! We're gonna go on the computer together, we're gonna pull up some references, so we're gonna compare them, Phoenix 1 and Phoenix 2, eh? Let's take a look at some photographs. You might want to come over here. I want to start with a juicy one, so let's do this viaduct shot. This is a good example because you can already see all the hallmarks of what's really different between these 2 films. Phoenix 1 is clearly the more colorful one, and Phoenix 2, like I've been going over, has this sort of green to yellow tint to it. And I think what you can also start to see here is that there's a bit of a pink tint on Phoenix 1, and I'd have to assume that they were trying to get that under control, and that's why we've got so much green in this new one. I did also take a slightly overexposed version of the same shot. So here we got an overexposed Phoenix 1 and an overexposed Phoenix 2. Even more obvious, you can see the really pink and really green side by side here. The Phoenix films, like Cinestill, they basically have a very strong halation. If you are a film photography person, you probably know all about halation. It's a bit of a meme. But halation is that kind of reddish outline, that little glow that you get when there's an area of high contrast. Some more recently produced, like, designer films like Cinestill and Phoenix that are kind of effects films, they really lean into that because it's one of those very filmy qualities that people obsess over. But a potential side effect is if you slightly overexpose something, the reddish glow kind of bleeds through and mixes and becomes this kind of pink, salmony color. What I will say is Phoenix 2 here holds up much better than its properly exposed cousin. I think definitely the overexposed version looks better just because, I don't know, if you're gonna have this sort of sepia tone quality, I think having a bit of a bloom kind of leads into that nostalgic feeling. Let's take another example. This is a shady scene in the forest on a moderately cloudy day. And this is the perfect example of why I describe Phoenix 2 as an autumnal version, as Phoenix 1 was, of a summery film. It just completely changes the mood and the sort of feeling of time and place in the second one. I think this is definitely a matter of opinion. I still prefer the first one. I just think it has a bit more depth. It seems to have a little bit more contrast. Another good, strong example is just a cloud formation on a pretty sunny day. Phoenix 1 is a very nice, beautiful teal color. It's very nostalgic to me, whereas Phoenix 2 is a lot more sort of flattened, and you can see that there's a bit of a warm tint to the highlights in the clouds. Again, it's really a matter of opinion, but you know what else is a matter of opinion? I think this cloud looks like a willy. So here we have a more shady scene. Anything on the shadowy side of the spectrum has been completely demolished by the contrast of this film. But it stands as a very good comparison of the color palette. Phoenix 1 has maintained the sort of cool blue hue that you get in the shade, whereas Phoenix 2 has that typical problem I mentioned of a color film slightly underexposed, ends up with this green haze in the shadows. But anyway, I did a safety overexposure, and this comes out a little bit better. Again, I think the sort of warm, earthy tones come out a lot better when there's some kind of glow to it, something to make it seem a bit more golden rather than pissy. I think both shots are pretty shit, to be honest. Flash shot. Ooh, who's that? I think in this case, because we are doing a sort of grungy shot with the flash, with the graffiti, with the bricks, the sepia tone works. It's serviceable, it's fine. However, you can definitely tell that Phoenix 1 maintains the individual colors better. If you look at the graffiti, they're just all the separate colors are reading better, whereas in Phoenix 2, they are sort of blended into this sepia tone mush. So I would definitely prefer the first one. I use studio lights, but I set them to 2700 Kelvin. That's the color temperature of like your average light bulb. And again, there is something interesting about this sepia color, but I think there's just so much detail lost here. If you look at my face, the highlight side of my face is just completely flattened and washed out. Actually, it happens to make it a little bit more flattering that you can't necessarily see all my eye bags and wrinkles, but there's definitely some detail loss in the highlights that's not as evident on Phoenix 1. I think that may be most of the comparisons that I really wanted to look at. Back to me. Should I have some kind of conclusion? Should I rate the film? I don't like to rate things. I don't want to be a reviewer. Obviously I didn't like Phoenix 2 that much. I like Phoenix 1 better. If you want to take away from this video, I like Phoenix 1 better than Phoenix 2. Do you agree? Leave a comment down below. You know, I don't care if you agree or not, it will help my engagement. Actually, I do care. I'm interested to solve the mystery of the shitty film. Next time, we're going to be looking at some film soup. So if you want to find out how to make your own film soup, subscribe. And yeah, this only took me 6 months to make, so I'll catch you next year. Bye!